I think at the end of the day, because I used to be an executive as well, I sat in those conferences and those keynotes. I've heard many different speakers. Every time I rated a 5 out of 5 as an attendee in those feedback surveys was when I learned something new. It was when my eyes were opened with this really different story or this really different point of view that this speaker brought in. You know, some of these conferences, it's a chance for these executives to meet each other and spark their creativity or jolt, give them new ways of thinking so that when they go back to their 9 to 5s, that they have this newer lens and they can keep that in mind.
Our guest today on the Keynote Curators podcast is Sharon Gai. Sharon is a China-born Canadian who is an expert in artificial intelligence, e-commerce, digital transformation, cultural fluidity, and is an extraordinary keynote speaker. Our conversation covers areas where business and technology converge and the opportunities that arise. It's a great conversation for you to have takeaways for your business and your organization to grow and expand. We appreciate you joining us. You're going to be smarter for it. Hello and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Seth Dechtman. I am your keynote curator. Today is our 51st episode. We have a very special guest. Sharon, will you say hello to everybody and tell us where this podcast finds you?
Sure. Hello, Seth, and everyone listening. So my name is Sharon Gai. I'm an author and keynote speaker, and I'm currently located in San Francisco, California.
San Francisco, California, where everybody left their heart, the Golden Gate Bridge. Sharon Gai, you come to us from San Francisco today, but your story traverses the globe. You have a breadth of experience in e-commerce, all sorts of things digitally transformative, even artificial intelligence, among many other things. I could tell our listeners, who, by the way, are mostly meeting professionals, meeting marketers, event planners, conference planners. We do get business owners, small business owners, medium-sized business owners, a lot from the financial services industry, but the overwhelming majority of our listeners are meeting professionals. I could read your bio and your profile, but I'd like to get a sense from you, keeping in mind who our audience is, how you got to where you are today on your career journey. You've had a successful book, Ecommerce Reimagined, where you're unsticking organizations. You speak on innovation, resilience, cultural intelligence. Just share a little bit about your journey.
Sure. You're definitely right. My journey has traversed the globe. I was on the phone with someone earlier and we were talking about where I mostly grew up, which was Canada, from the West Coast, the East Coast, and then to the States, back to China, where I was actually born. So my career has also traversed the globe as well, from Canada, the US, Spain, and China most recently. And now I'm back in the US in San Francisco. I think my speaking journey started pretty interestingly. And earlier today, I was also recalling where it started is from speaking competitions that I did in high school. I remember my first one was one in New York at the UN, where we had to talk about international development. I think I was about 15, 16 at the time. I had won that competition, and that's now that I recall where it all started. Professionally, though, I had always had the pleasure of representing several of the employers that I was with at the time. Everyone from Telstra to Samsung to cloud companies to most recently Alibaba and then Pattern, speaking about digital transformation, e-commerce, and most recently more about AI. And now I'm focusing more on speaking, because what I've noticed is every time I go on a stage, first of all, I very rarely look like a previous speaker that this event planner or company has hired before. There's very few women and women of color on these stages. And so from a representation standpoint, I think I bring a bout of diversity to all of these stages and conferences I go to. And then the second part of which is my experiences. So there's very few professionals that's had the experience that I've had internationally. whether it's throughout North America or back into East in China. So from all of that, the stories that I bring are very unique. They're stories of innovation, the latest that I've seen from an e-commerce and retail perspective in China, some of the latest AI projects that I had worked on at Alibaba, and then also in the US, all of the different cloud companies and technology hardware companies I've worked with here in North America. And so because of that, I also feel like I'm a bridge connecting the East and the West, telling people stories and projects and industries that they might have never heard of before. And so that is something that I really pride myself in doing. From what event producers have told me is very different.
I love that word bridge. I can really relate to that. And when we first got connected digitally, among many things that appealed to me was your TED Talk, where this idea of, if I may, and correct me if I'm wrong, this bridge or this, cultural mindset that you talk about, it resonated with me on a very personal level because whilst you might be east to east west, Sharon, I'm north south. My upbringing is in North Jersey, but I lived all over the states: Maine, Vermont, Maryland, Washington, D.C., South Carolina, Nevada, Colorado, California, all over the country, and in several countries in Latin America, of which, I'm fluent in several languages, Spanish and Portuguese. My wife is from South America, from Argentina, and I'm constantly dancing through or walking on that bridge, if you will, culturally, language wise, semantically, tones. Just the food could be a whole separate podcast, right? Tastes, palate, what works, timing of when you're eating. That's a whole separate podcast. Talk to me a little bit about that bridge, about your TED Talk, about this culture fluid mindset, and the bridge itself, or bridging the gap, if you will.
Yeah, sure. So this also stems from times where I grew up. So I was originally born in China. So technically, my first language is Chinese, but I moved to Canada when I was at a pretty young age, and it was there that I was met with this new culture, new language. I walk in first day of school. The only words that I really know are the numbers and the colors. And then what I realized is, kids back home in China were learning algebra already at the age of 7, but I step into a Canadian classroom and they asked me to just color within the lines. So that was a very different type of environment, activity, tone. And so it was a bit of a culture shock. And I remember going to school one of these days, sitting down at lunch and opening my box of Chinese dumplings as a lunch item. I know it sounds great, but
Oh,
it was.
I'm hungry, right? I'm hungry right now, honestly.
But it didn't seem like such a great idea with the kids that I sat with. A big ew had erupted from the crowd because the first city that I went to was a predominantly white neighborhood, and there were a lot of kids who were not used to seeing somebody like me. So it was that day that it really hit me that this is a complete new culture. I might not have such an easy way of navigating. And so what do I do now? And I think when people are put in those situations where, you feel othered, or you don't feel like you belong, or you feel that you are different, the crux here is you feel different. And for me, it was a cultural thing. For anybody else, it might be a difference in ideology, in religion, in sex, gender, what have you, a different opinion. I think it's those times that people start building resilience and a way to adapt. I think that's where I really learned my adaptability skills during that time. And so I go through a period of what I call Canadianization or North Americanization. And by the end of it, I am eating sandwiches like some of the other kids at school. But after that, I always had this inkling of, and a way of empathizing too with other people who maybe they were from an immigrant background, or maybe they were just representing something that was not like the mainstream. But for me, though, keeping that in mind and still not crystallizing exactly the insight or what is the insight there. And it wasn't until that I went back to China eventually when I started working in Alibaba and in the area of digital transformation that I felt it again when I went back to China, where I was lumped with what they would call the foreigners, because by then I had a Canadian passport. My English is the way that I sound right now, which probably sounds a little different from the English that's spoken by a Chinese person in China. And it was there that I felt a little othered again. So here is this seemingly Chinese looking person, but she sounds so Western, and she's eating sandwiches now.
Yeah. It's like the reverse of the reverse, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. And at that time, it was the 2016, 2017 when China-US relations was was walking on a tightrope. It was there that I felt a little othered again. And that was when I realized that people just needed a reminder of, we call it formally cultural intelligence, but really the word that I call it is being culturally fluid.
Mm-hmm.
And I can go into explaining
Yeah, I mean,
that a bit.
why do you make that distinction? I mean, it sounds very personal. It's a very unique personal journey experience, right? I mean, I joke, I say it's the reverse of the verse, but I don't know how you would language it. It's the inverse of the inverse. I mean, you experienced it coming to Canada, and then you experience the exact same thing, albeit you're a native born Chinese in China, but being related to, as dare I say, a Canadian.
Or am I just a Canadian is the main part? Or am I both? Am
Right.
I non-binary in that sense? Or am I all of it? Right.
Right.
So
Right.
that's why I always joke when my mom's hated question when someone meets me for the first time is, where are you from?
Mm,
Because it's very hard for me to answer you with a one word answer of where I'm from.
right.
I'm just from
Well,
too many different
yeah.
places.
You know, it's an interesting question because I love language. I just love language. And it's like, where are you from? Where do you live? You know, I mean, I live in South Carolina right now. I'm from New Jersey, but I'm really grew up in Colorado. But I don't want to make this about me, but do you think that in this cultural fluid mindset, asking somebody where they were born, is that too intimate, too fast?
No, I think, well, it depends on how many questions of that nature you're asking. I think
Right.
asking just where you're born
Right.
might actually make the other person who might have had many different international experiences feel a little too narrow.
Yeah.
Sometimes where you're born might not matter because you might have moved away from
Correct.
a very young age. Your growth years, these years where you're learning your values and that could be a completely different country. That's why I came up with this term. And surprisingly, digging deeper, there's about 420 million people in the world that's quote unquote culturally fluid. So these are people who were born in a country
Okay.
that moved away and grew up somewhere else. Or these are people that grew up in a country, but because of careers, spouses, a lot of people who are diplomats or previously in the military or expats. So a lot of country managers for different organizations, brands, because of their careers, moved to another country or continent. You might be an immigrant, so you're just moving in a different stage of life. And all of those experiences will make
Right.
you a much more culturally intelligent person and a culturally fluid person.
And how do you see, I want to shift the conversation a little bit, but I like this through line because, my children are North and South, they're a blend, right? They're culturally, they have this fluidity. And not only do they move between their native speakers in both languages, I mean, slang, the accent, it's fascinating. But I've noticed sometimes between my children, they'll speak in one language with each other. And then sometimes, depending on the situation, they'll speak to each other, even in private, in different languages at different times. I find that fascinating. But the Gen Alpha population, the ones born after 2010, right? They're in a digital 100%, I don't know exactly how to say it, 100% digital world. What are the successful businesses doing today in terms of user interface or their digital ecosystem or their digital mindset to be positioned now and in the future for this long-term success for this future workforce and client base?
I think a lot of brands for sure and retailers who are the main type of clientele that I normally work with, they're definitely scratching their heads. And the reason why they scratch their heads over this is because they know that if they can approach somebody of a Gen Alpha and start building that brand loyalty when they're that young, and they'll have that customer for life. And there's something called a customer lifetime value, which is a metric that a lot of these brands and retailers usually like to talk about. And that is something that they'll be getting when they're reaching somebody very young. And so the next question is, how do they reach the people this generation and in what way? And I think there's various different methods here or types of ways. So I think the metaverse was really big in terms of uniting a retail and gaming front. There's I don't know if your kids are on this, but there's a platform called Roblox.
Oh, don't I
You
know it?
probably
Oh,
that might
we're
be the
Roblox. We are a Roblox household. Keep going. Yes. The short
yeah, that might
answer
be
is yes.
that might be the bane of existence for some parents nowadays
You know
because
what?
they
It's
just
fairly benign. And frankly, school is starting next week and we're kind of recalibrating our whole digital activity. What I've observed from it from a distance without being too vigilant is they're pretty still kind of innocent and benign and they're enjoying it. So, it's good.
yeah. No, there's actually so many great experiments within Roblox in an educational front. So the way that a lot of concepts are being taught is the way that they're being gamified is actually a great way for kids to be learning. So, I don't think it's all evil. And I think this, going back to this culture fluid mindset, is not everything is black and white, right? There's good parts about TikTok. There's also bad parts about TikTok, but it could be very helpful or educational, or people can be doom scrolling and wasting 2+ hours on it. So it just depends on that situation. But I think what you see a lot of brands and retailers are experimenting with is this new way of communicating to this younger audience in a more genuine and authentic way. So this has started happening in the millennial generation and then the Gen Z. And so within the Gen Alpha generation is they want an even more delightful and authentic piece to the way that they're communicating to seemingly businesses or brands. And so changing that voice is really important for some of these organizations to take into account.
I mean, because especially children, you can't fool them, right? If it's not authentic. I don't know, they resist it or deflect it. As the technology advances, right, and the world's becoming, I don't know if the language is, we're using the word digital a lot, Sharon, or at least I am, smaller because of this digital connection that we have. Everything is closer and closer, and it's become more achievably closer because of our digital connection. But in one of your blogs that I read, you predicted that there's going to be an even bigger digital divide among generations, not only in the workplace, but across countries even. And those who don't have access to reliable internet, never mind ChatGPT, you said AI has become a commodity that we can't live without, like maps and the calculator, and that companies have realized overnight that they may be out of business if they don't figure out a way to provide more value than ChatGPT. For our listeners who, as I said, are event professionals, how important is it for this keynote topic to be integrated into conference content? And if there were any assumptions in what I read that I got wrong, please correct me.
So AI is this new thing that everyone is scratching their heads over, right? So I think there's a lot of clickbait videos out there. If there's a video saying it's going to kill all of us, and then there's a clickbait video saying you're going to become a millionaire. As a part-time content creator, I've been on that side of the house where I know that those titles are just purely clickbait titles. So no matter if you're an event planner or you lead an organization, just be a little cautious of what you're reading. because this AI thing is definitely not a all good or all negative type of animal. I think it's important to have a more nuanced and a more thoughtful and response to what is happening. So there are definitely pros to AI. It's going to definitely be changing things like healthcare, where there's a lot of early detection via computer vision, where a lot of tumors or diseases can be detected in X-rays or MIR scans. There's also a lot of drugs that's being created right now in a company called In Silico. They're taking these massive billion parameter data sets and trying to figure out what type of drug formation can work for their diseases. And in terms of retail, that's also already changing the game. If you look at a lot of the apps that's coming out of China, most notably a couple of years ago, TikTok, the way that its algorithm has formed in finding the right viewer for a certain video and looking at this customer journey from another type of lens and personalization in this world of shopping, where there's an app called Taobao from China. It's owned by its mother company is Alibaba. And the way that they do personalization is very, very progressive. So not only depending on who is opening that app, so whether me or you, but also the displays will change based on when and where I'm opening this app. So for instance, if I'm opening this app in the morning, it's going to show me a product that is different versus when opening it at night. If I'm at home, I'm opening this app, maybe it's showing me, I don't know, a computer versus when I'm at work, it's going to show me some sort of outfit
Sure.
that's for the office.
Yeah.
So
Or the
that level of
weekend or
personal,
a holiday too, right?
and it changes with season, with the different months. Yeah. So that type of machine learning and that type of that level of personalization is really going to take off in the shopping space. So in those blogs, I mentioned a story from this book called Quality Land, which is a book that is it's a sci-fi novel. And in that book, there's a company called The Shop, and it's very akin to Amazon. And the beginning of the story is where this main
Very original title, The Shop.
in that time of AI, we don't know where creativity is. So that's why
Yeah.
they're calling it by what it is. So the protagonist in the beginning of the story receives this pink dolphin shaped vibrator, but he's a guy saying, "Why is this being sent to me?" And the
He's a
reason
little
for that,
bit perplexed. I mean, he likes dolphins, right? I mean, who doesn't like dolphins?
maybe the algorithm caught that. But the reason for that is because the shop's algorithm can send you products even before you know to buy them. And so it's
Ooh.
this future where people are just getting packages at their doorstep because the shop knows you so well that they know exactly what you need to buy. So you don't even need to go on an app of any sort to browse
Lordy.
items, compare prices, click on it, because that takes time
Right.
and whatnot. So yeah,
That's
I think that's potentially the future in a couple of years. It's definitely not going to happen in 2024, but this level of personalization is something that AI is going to walk us towards.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more broad strokes. This is the world you live in. You're the expert, but I've heard things like the behavior of your home, meaning the humans in it, the animals in it, the toilet paper use, the detergent use, the shampoo use. At some point, right now on whether it's Alibaba or Amazon or other shops, you can buy a product on a regular basis, right? On a kind of,
Subscription.
subscription or recurring, right? But now they're going to kind of know, oh, no, wait, you travel for X amount of time every 12 months. So stop it there. Like the subscription right now, as it is, doesn't take that into considerations. It's just, on the business front, as far as, it's a tool. One of the drums I've been beating, Sharon, is AI, at least yet, doesn't see, doesn't smell, doesn't taste, doesn't touch. And there are colloquialisms. It's limited in how far back it's going, at least ChatGPT. And, we, the users, are still figuring out our relationship to it as a tool, not the end, right? It's not the destination. So, I am encouraged when I hear speakers like you give us a panorama and give us a kind of an overview of what to keep an eye out for, what to be concerned about, and how maybe to optimize its use. And it's a conversation that I think is in its very early infancy. No?
For sure. I think a lot of people are going to be discovering the wonders of AI and how they can actually be more productive with it. But at the same time, people are going to be discovering this scary side of AI and the amount of misinformation that's happening. I mean, there's so many tools out there right now where I'm telling you all of these and this information live, right? I can very much train a bot or a version of me in places like Synthesia, where I can speak into this app for a couple of minutes. It can learn my voice, my intonations. I seeded a couple of my photos, and then I can write out this entire podcast transcript later and give it to this bot, and this bot can speak on behalf of me. There's also bots where it can sort of replace you to go to a meeting. So, and some, all of our calendars are very busy. And sometimes we don't have time to go to
Right.
every one of the meetings that we
Right.
are scheduled to go to. And this bot can replace you to attend one of these and take notes for you, tell you the to-dos or the things to note from the meeting. And then you take that and get on with your day. So once again, there's the good sides and the bad sides. But if you had a more culture fluid mindset, you'll know to stay somewhat in the middle or be conscious of the two extremes.
Yeah.
So that you can make more sound decisions.
Yeah, that's great advice. These cultural fluidity, I want to somehow connect to event professionals. You're a speaker, you go to events in person, virtually, hybrids. You interact with the attendees, you interact with the event professionals, meeting professionals, event planners. What can they employ digital strategy wise? It's not an end all be all answer, but from your perspective and your experience, that what could these meeting professionals employ at their next event to enrich the overall audience experience or engagement?
Yeah. So first of all, they're welcome to watch the TED Talk to learn the core pieces of that mindset. But I think the main part is just knowing to bring in several different types of opinions into a conference, because that is what is going to stir a lot of discussions amongst the participants and cause a lot of different types of neurons to be firing in these attendees' brains. And so something that I talk about in my TED Talk is something called dialectical thinking, where you're holding two opposing thoughts at the same time, but you can still derive at a reasonable conclusion after you've evaluated both sides. So take AI, for example. Maybe you were a naysayer. So you're one of those people that wanted to sign that letter that came out, which wanted to pause the progression of AI. But enter a conference and maybe listen to both speakers. So one speaker believes in exactly what you believe in. And when you're listening to them, you're probably nodding your head. Yep, yep. Those are definitely things that I agree with. And then maybe the next speaker is somebody who is very pro AI, who is very idealistic about all the things that AI can bring to us. And then this attendee will probably, what's going on in his or her head is, don't think I agree. Nope, 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 nope. But at least after this person has heard both sides of the coin, both sides of the story, they can still believe in what they do, but at least their belief now is much more thorough, much more examined, and much more holistic after considering both lenses. And I think what also event planners can do in that sense is bring in people from different industries. So I most recently have been called upon to attend a healthcare industry. Even though I am not from that industry, my husband is. He works in healthcare, and he has always tried to get me to go into his side of the world, but I just want to stay cleanly in my B2C retail space. But what he said to me is the reason why that healthcare consortium wanted to ask for your lens is because a lot of these things that I talk about in this B2C space, like the AI piece, the personalization piece, the avatar related things. These are things that's also happening in a healthcare space. And it's a new thinking that might be very refreshing for a healthcare executive to listen to, instead of repeatedly going to these conferences where they've heard the same healthcare executives who's been in their industries for 2, 3, 4 decades and repeating some of the previous slides or answers that they've talked about. And so I think that's also part of it also, is as an event planner to be conscious of the different types of people you're bringing into an industry. If they are from a different industry, or maybe it was a very American centric company or conference, to bring in someone more international, maybe from South America or Europe, because they will definitely have a very unique lens and a different lens. And they'll be able to enrich your conference with a newer and fresher type of information. I think at the end of the day, because I used to be an executive as well, I sat in those conferences and those keynotes. I've heard many different speakers. Every time I rated a 5 out of 5 as an attendee in those feedback surveys was when I learned something new. It was when my eyes were opened with this really different story or this really different point of view that this speaker brought in. Some of these conferences, it's a chance for these executives to meet each other and spark their creativity or jolt, give them new ways of thinking, so that when they go back to their 9 to 5s, that they have this newer lens and they can keep that in mind. So those are some of the things.
No, those are great. And I think the through line, the
saying.
undercurrent there, the foundation of it all is this cultural, this bridge, this fluidity, bringing in different ideas and provoking in a positive, healthy sense, and sparking a different point of view, a different perspective, all in the virtue of growth and learning and being aware of and expanding people's mindsets and capacities. So those are great ideas. And, I know our listeners will take them to heart. Sharon, I'd like to switch into the final portion of our conversation. We call it 20 questions. It's not technically 20 questions, but we're looking for rapid fire answers. So are you ready to go?
Yes, I am.
Okay. All righty. We'll start easy and then we'll build up. What do you prefer? A walk on the beach or a nice bike ride on a long trail in the woods?
Definitely the beach. I was
Definitely.
born by water, moved to all these different cities by water. And I have a hypothesis that my past life was a fish.
Well, there you go. We're back to the dolphin again. Okay. All righty. Chocolate or vanilla ice cream?
I think chocolate. Chocolate, yeah, because it's a bit
Okay.
more different.
It's a bit more different. Dumplings or sandwiches?
Oh, that's a good one. By now, if there was a food that was like half a duckling, half a sandwich, I would try that. Maybe that's
Ooh,
more of like a taco, like a
you
stuffed
know what?
taco. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
let's get ChatGPT on that and see if we can do a bridge sandwich between a dumpling and a sandwich. That would be amazing. That would be amazing. A sandaling or something like that.
Dump witch.
What's the most What's the most interesting thing about you that we wouldn't learn from your resume?
That in my earlier years, I grew up on my own. So this is also, I think, a very interesting part of me and who I am. So because of all of my upbringing and whatnot, my parents left back to China when I was very young, and so for the latter half of my high school years, I spent it in what we call a homestay program.
Hmm.
And so I was responsible for a lot of the adulty things that adults would
Yeah,
do at a very young age.
yeah. The
And I think
forms,
that
the
was
appointments, yeah,
yep, the signing.
yeah,
Yep,
yeah,
yep, yep.
yeah,
All the
yeah.
appointments.
I can relate. My
And
parents didn't go back to China, but I definitely filled out a lot of forms when I was 15 and 16 and,
yeah,
doctor's, dentist appointments and, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
get out of
So,
class notes.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. What's the last movie you saw?
In a theater, I did Barbenheimer
Ah, very nice. You did Barbie and Oppenheimer.
and then
Yeah.
Oppenheimer.
I'm missing the last half. We did the Barbie. We give it the thumbs up.
Okay.
What's the last book you read?
Think Again, Adam Grant.
Ooh, love me some Adam Grant. If you could be anywhere in the world right now, where would it be?
Probably Spain,
Ah,
which I'll be
España.
going to.
Oh,
España, yeah. I spent a period of time in my life in Spain, in Madrid, when I was on exchange. And ever since then, I had always said that if I could pick anywhere to live, I would pick Spain.
it's fantastic. It's a great everything. The food, the country, the culture, the geography. It's just wonderful. What's on your bucket list that you'd like to knock off next?
I think probably going to a new country that or a new continent that I have not been, like the Nordics, which is a region that I had never touched yet, or maybe
Right.
Antarctica.
Ooh, very cool. Very cool. If you could have a choice between a 5-star luxury resort on a beach or camping up in the mountains, which would you choose?
Definitely the mountains.
Definitely the
Yeah,
mountains.
definitely the mountains.
We'd have to put a
I
body of water in there, a lake or a river or something like that.
Yeah, maybe. But I think I've recently started to be more. Maybe it's because of the move to California. Be more into camping.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
fun. Yeah, commune with nature. All righty, last one. We'll finish it off with, what are 3 adjectives that your friends would use to describe you?
they would say I'm very creative, outspoken, and brings a new type of thought to people.
I would say they nailed it, because from what I've learned from our interactions, that pretty much encapsulates who you are. Sharon, I can't express my gratitude enough for your time today. I know our listeners, the majority are meeting professionals, have learned from you and, in my mind, expanded their capacities and their viewpoint and their perspective. And just, I appreciate so much the beginning of this relationship and working with my clients, with you, and seeing what the future holds for us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Seth, as well.
You got it. Thanks for spending time with us today. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to our content. We'll keep bringing you the latest industry news and insights. Don't forget to follow us on social media so you never miss an update. And if you're looking for a keynote speaker for your next event, reach out to us directly or visit our website at thekeynotecurators.com.